Hello, and welcome to a webinar on teacher recommendation writing for college admission, writing compelling letters. I am Brennan Barnard. I'm the Director of College Counseling at the Derryfield School, which is an independent day school in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm also the College Admission Program Advisor at Making Caring Common at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. We have a great group lined up for you today to talk about writing teacher recommendations. So Diane, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Diane Campbell. I'm the Director of College Counseling at Liberty Common High School. It's a charter school in Fort Collins, Colorado, just north of Denver.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erik DeAngelis. I am Senior Associate Director of Admission at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island.
So thanks for being with us. And Diane's going to talk a little bit about kind of the flow of today. We hope for this to be a great resource for you all and to kind of keep it short and concise in a digestible manner so that you can get a sense for what colleges are looking for and what role you play.
You know, what's great about this session is we do want to keep it brief, but also cover hopefully some new and useful resources for some of you that for a bulletin narrative format that you may have not seen or utilized before. But we also want to provide some tangible resources for you to use when writing letters of recommendation and talk through some blind spots that you may have as writers, but also some great resources to make you better writers to support students in the process. So as we know, the letter, as Erik will talk to later on, can be a very compelling piece in the student's story, in their application, and your words, especially as teachers that truly know students in a light that can be so valuable to colleges and scholarships. Your letter means a lot, and it really can change the trajectory of a student's application, opportunities for evaluation, for scholarship. So it's really important to know that your letter does hold value, and Erik will share exactly how that letter will be used. So just know it's an important piece of that.
This is just a survey that was done by the National Association of College Admission Counseling, NACAC. And this looks at trends within the college admission profession. And college admission deans were asked, what was important in their review of first-year student applications. And we just wanted you to see that, I mean, obviously the academic performance and grades and such that a student is responsible for is highest on the list, but that teacher and counselor recommendations are highly valued and are looked to in assessing students. And so again, the energy and care with which you write these recommendations is really important and much appreciated.
So I just want to chat a little bit about barriers or what we call blind spots, especially as teachers. Sometimes we're a first-time teacher, a veteran teacher, and really where have you been taught or have received training in letter writing? The reality is for a lot of you teaching core courses, you will write more letters, as that's sometimes what the majority of colleges are looking for, are core course teacher recommendations. So, the main thing to think about is, how are you connecting with students, especially now when a lot of us are virtual or that we are limited in how we have time and access with students within our buildings. So it's just really important to think about how, as a teacher, can you maybe find new ways to connect with students. And letter writing is one more thing on your responsibility chart. It's, you have all these other responsibilities and then you have multiple students. I mean, sometimes some of you write multiple letters, but it's really thinking about what are some of the barriers that I feel as a teacher that I can improve in this letter writing process and write in a different light in support of that student, because some of you have never received training, and then you're supposed to write this compelling letter. So that's what we hope you can gain here too, or some resources to help you to write more compelling letters.
Great. And some of those resources are really, you know, your observations of a student in the classroom, but also, you know, where you're seeing them in other settings, and how you interact with them. And the point of a teacher recommendation, as we'll talk about a little more later, is not to talk about all their activities and their extracurriculars and everything like that. That's really covered in the counselor recommendation. Schools really want to know from teachers what is happening in the classroom, who are they as a learner. But you do maybe see students in maybe Model UN or the school newspaper or the yearbook or something like that, and have other insights into some of their academic engagement. And those provide opportunities to talk about that in your letter. A lot of teachers will look to do interviews with students. If a student asks them to write them a recommendation, they'll schedule, 10, 15 minutes with a student and sit down and talk about, some of their strengths and what they would hope that faculty member addresses in their letter of recommendation. Some teachers will give students a survey with a number of questions about maybe what they were proud of that they did in their class, a special project that they want to make sure the teacher mentions in the recommendation, that kind of thing, just to gain as much information as you can from the student about why they chose you as a teacher to write on their behalf. And that also might include you reaching out to other teachers in your department or in the school, just to get a sense for, what else are they seeing? So if you're a senior year English teacher writing for a student, you might reach out to somebody who had that student as a sophomore and be able to talk about the growth they've made, or other ways they're involved in class. And that's the kind of collaborative nature of these letters. It's helpful for you to know from the student who the other recommenders are. Usually students will ask 2 faculty members. And so it's helpful for you to know, am I the only one writing for this student? Is there another English teacher writing for this student? Is there a math teacher, et cetera? So you can kind of engage as many voices in your recommendation as possible.
Yeah, and just to bounce off that too, before we talk about the process, also think about where the student hangs out in the building. Are they in the band room? Are they in theater? Are they in athletics and art? Talking to faculty members that really see that student in a lot of space will help as well. Then when you're thinking about the writing process, how do I get started in this writing, but really more helping students understand your process. It's really important that you set your guidelines up front with students as to how much time you need to write letters, when they should request, really making sure every building has a different culture and expectation as to when and how letters are written. But you have to realize too that you in fact can create your own process to manage your time and honor the process for you if you are writing multiple letters. So being very transparent with students in how you're going to gather information from them, how much time you're going to need in writing a letter, really helps students, understand your process. Some teachers say, I'll only write 20 letters and that's all I'm going to write for the year. So, what are your rules and regulations, and making sure that's being communicated to your parent and student community, just so that they know and that your time is honored. And then getting started, Brennan's going to.
Yeah, and I'll just say with the timeline, more and more, the majority of students in many schools have at least one deadline in November of their senior year. So as we talk with teachers, whether students, have a November 15th deadline or maybe December or January, we really work with our teachers to say, you know, by November 1st, you should really try to have all your letters done. That's a heavy lift for some faculty members. But it's just for your planning, I think it's helpful to know that that's when the bulk of the letters will be kind of coming to roost. In getting started, and we're going to talk a little more about this, and Erik's going to kind of expand on it. But you know, as you think about that student in the class, it's helpful to think about if that student wasn't there, if that student's absent, what's missing from the class? What does that student contribute to the class that is accentuated when they're not there? What kind of stories do you have from a project they might have worked on? How do their classmates relate to them, and how would they describe them in terms of being a lab partner or a editor of their work and that kind of thing? And also, I think really important to colleges is how those students engage with people who have different perspectives and different beliefs and different backgrounds, and that's a huge thing that comes to light in the classroom that is really helpful for teachers to expand on.
All right, thank you. So I'll be giving a little bit of the perspective from the college admission officer side and the things that might be helpful for you as you start to craft your letters and your recommendations, what we're looking for. So just a couple of things that I always like to start off with how much time you spend reading a letter of recommendation to how they're used. Essentially, they're used for us to get more of a sense of what that student is going to be like in the classroom from your perspective as a teacher, but also gather your observations in how they interact with not just the material and the work, but with other students in the class as well. I always get how long should they be and what should or how much time do you spend reading a letter of recommendation. I think the length is going to be predominantly dependent on everything from mechanical pieces to your font and your margins, all the way to the substance that you want to get across. For the most part, a very standard one-page single space is usually the standard for many teacher recommendation letters. I also say don't force it. If you cannot do a full page, don't feel like you need to force it. Many people feel like they can be very concise within just that one, just even half a page. So really it's dependent upon your relationship and what you want to get across to us. And we will end up being fast readers. And so feel free to just know that the more hyperbolic or super detailed that a letter can get, it can sometimes be a little glazing to our eyes at times, especially when we're reading somewhere to the tune of 2,000 applicants a year, multiply that by about 3 letters of recommendation per student. So what is most helpful? I always say rigor and relationship in setting the context right up front is very helpful. I want to get a sense of the rigor of the class that you are teaching, but also the relationship that exists. Maybe you're also an advisor or a coach, or if you're simply just interacting with them in that classroom setting. I like to know the context of how they perform within the relation to their peers. So it's always sometimes helpful to quantify this student consistently performs in the top 25% of all the students in the class. That could be helpful for us to know, especially if you're trying to convey that this student is relatively exceptional within your class. We'd like to know, are they more of an individual worker? Are they someone that really performs and shines in group work? I also like to hear a little bit more about how they can master the material, especially for CAPT or STEM programs. CAPT meaning that they're applying to a much more competitive program with more limited spots. So let's say you have a student applying to an engineering program and you happen to be their math or science teacher, really harping in on what it is that they are doing well in right now to essentially make an argument to the college faculty that this student can handle that work. Any kind of knowledge that you have beyond the classroom or exemplary projects that highlight their learning, but also your honesty is very, very helpful. What's least helpful would be things that we can see in other places of the application. Now, as their teachers, you might not know exactly what the common application or what college-specific applications are looking like, but just know that we do not necessarily need a regurgitation of their resume. But if there are compelling accomplishments that you want to bring to the forefront that might not have to do with your class, that would be great as well. Also take a look at your school profile. This is typically available in your school counseling office. This will give you a sense of the types of things that we already see because those profiles are sent to our colleges with the individual application. Again, I always like to stress the kind of hyperbole, or what we sometimes call poetic fluff. Sometimes it takes up a lot of space in an application, and as you are reading through, a lot of this hyperbole can sometimes clog up a lot of your messaging. So just practice a little bit of restraint on that. You also have to know that many times, you're writing in a mechanical sense that might go over the reader's head. So if you are a physics teacher talking about a lot of physics concepts in detail, it's going to go over my head because I'm not a physicist necessarily. I also say that a lot of teachers will sometimes feel compelled to write very detailed about their CV or their personal background. Not necessarily something that we need to know unless it is very critical for context. For instance, you taught at the college level in an area for many years, and now you're teaching at a high school, gives us a sense that maybe you're teaching at a pace or in a curriculum that's a little bit faster than the average class. And last but not least, what's often missing? We have this kind of theme of character. We like to hear what type of student they are, person to person, things like integrity, how they interact with their peers. Anything that isn't necessarily always apparent just by looking at a grade. Diane talked about informal observations, where you see the student. If you can talk about, they always are opening the doors for the teachers, or I always see them talking to maybe the student in the school that doesn't have as many friends. Something great for us to know. Again, addressing weaknesses or areas of growth are never bad. That's not harming a student. It just gives us an honest assessment of a student at that time.
Great, thanks. So there's as many styles and ways of writing recommendations as there are schools and individuals writing them. As Erik mentioned, this is not a chance to get poetic and write soliloquies and to you're not being graded on these recommendations, but they are really important. But again, college admission officers don't have tons of time to be digging into each letter, and some of the prose is lost on them. And so trying to streamline the writing and really focus on what they need to hear and what you need to get across and how they can be impactful is helpful. And so more and more counselor recommendations and ideally teacher recommendations are focusing on this kind of bullet point format where in a number of different areas, and we're going to show you some examples, you kind of don't feel the need to write full paragraphs, but you can just bullet point things that you've observed or key issues that you want to draw out. And so I'm going to turn it over to Diane to kind of give her example, and then I'll give an example, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So here's just an example of the format we use here at Liberty Common. These are a very frequently used sections, but does not mean that you have to use them. But what's nice is you can write a narrative underneath each headline or even bullet point. Quick, like Erik mentioned, they just want to see quick lines, information about a student. Keep in mind too, as a teacher, sometimes you're writing a letter for multiple requests. You're writing one letter for a college that can also be used for an honors program, that can also be used for a scholarship application. So what's really nice about these headlines is you can change them according to what sometimes that scholarship is asking for. Or if you're writing it for an honors program, you can talk to the intellectual capacity of a student. So what I really love about this is it gives you a framework to work within rather than a blank, intimidating page that you have to fill. So teachers have taken this on here at Liberty Common and have said multiple times it's made their time more efficient. They're able to not feel so burdened with the letter writing, but it's actually been a little more fun for them as well.
Great. And this is just an example of another way to look at it. in the bullet point, and providing right up front a description, as Erik was talking about kind of what context in which you've had them, what courses you taught the student, your background, maybe as a teacher for 30 years at the school, or what your background is, not in depth as to kind of the research you've done and the books you've written and things like that, but just giving some context. And then this beginning with a kind of a summary and a narrative paragraph, and that's often what is kind of the beginning paragraph of a lot of letters that faculty will write, that might tell a story about the student or draw out a specific moment that stands out for you. And then getting really, with these bullet points, getting into some of those core skills and accomplishments in the classroom, how they, how they've done as a student and what you've observed, contributions to classroom culture, how they've interacted with classmates, and are they a leader in class discussion, all those kinds of things. And again, these are just bullet points. You don't need to explain in great detail, but this makes it really easy as college admissions reviewers read the application and go into kind of their committee discussion of students to hone in on areas that they need to know more about or need to communicate more about to their colleagues. And then some examples of work that is outstanding, like a really interesting experiment they did, or a paper that they wrote, or a research paper, something, or something they've done outside of class that really stands out, that you know about, some research they did independently, that kind of thing. And in the summary, just going back to the summary paragraph, that would be really that opportunity to draw out some of the characteristics of the student, compassionate, resilient, putting some adjectives in there for admission officers to really, as you think of this student, what are the 3-4 adjectives that really stand out to you as a teacher? So
I think this format could be very helpful as well when you are a newer writer, a newer teacher, and maybe don't know students as well. You can really fine tune these headlines to the student, and especially for students who maybe struggle, or there just isn't a lot to write, or they've had some unfortunate barriers. There's some things you can include in those sections as well.
And I would just add from the college side that there is absolutely no preference as to what style in which we receive these letters. In some cases, this bullet style is going to be very, very helpful for you, especially if you are getting a lot of requests for letters. We will have no preference one way or the other. So if you are a traditionalist and you want to keep it with the paragraph format, that is entirely fine as well.
Great point. So here are just a few resources. There's some great resources out there. And again, check with your college counseling or your school counseling office for other resources or examples and things like that. Here's some useful resources, one from Tulane University from Jeff Schiffman, and another from Carleton College. And then there is a resource here from Lisa, who works in a high school and has brought together a bunch of different materials, some advice from admissions reviewers at Reed College, and from Ethan Sawyer, who writes about college essays, and some other things that will be helpful for you as you kind of need examples and need fodder for your recommendations. So hopefully this will be a useful resource for you. And finally, and these are, again, our email addresses, and we would encourage you, if you have questions about writing recommendations, to start with your school counselor and the resources they have, but feel free to reach out to us, and if we can be supportive of you in any way, we're happy to do so. Any final thoughts, Diane, Erik?
Just say, don't be afraid of the page. Just embrace it. And, colleges will pull from it what they need more than you realize.